of the academic year 2012-13. We're doing something quite different this afternoon. We have a very special guest, Arnesen, and we're doing this because it's a very special time. We have elections coming up, and as you know, the Mass Teachers Association has endorsed, if you don't know, you'll be hearing more about it, the Mass Teachers Association, our parent union, has endorsed several candidates, among them Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren, as well as Catherine Ives, who's running for the state senate nearby, Kathleen Ives, as well as Barbara L'Italienne, who's running for the state rep district, and many others. And you'll be getting communication on this, but I thought I'd just give you a heads up. Arnesen is experienced in politics, to say the least. She's a radio talk personality, liberal democratic media personality, which I think is kind of unusual out there, but she's also been a member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, representing the town of Orford, which, if you know anything about New Hampshire politics, is one of the most, Alan knows, is one of the more...
Meldrum Thompson land.
Meldrum Thompson's homeland. Meldrum Thompson was the arch-conservative governor of New Hampshire back in the 80s, who I had the pleasure of working on a campaign against him. But that was fun. But Arnie has also been a gubernatorial candidate in New Hampshire, the first one, and she also ran for Congress. One of the write-ups about her on her political charter website is the recovered conscience of political discourse. Arnie uses an open conversational style, engaging hearts and minds with energy, extraordinary alertness, quickness of mind, and most of all, a great good humor. Arnie sets a high standard, leading guests and audiences to discover thoughts and ideas, examine social, political, and moral positions from all sides, conveying the ultimate message of respect. Make the decision for yourself. So, Arnie is actually committed to be with us till 1:30. I know many of you have to leave for 1 o'clock classes. I'm going to ask you to exit through the rear door. We'll keep that door open instead of this one today. But don't hesitate as you're exiting to sign up for some of the campaigns. There are a couple of clipboards that will be placed out there. One focusing on New Hampshire, where Barack Obama is running in a swing state election. Needs your help there. And we also will have a couple for the Warren campaign, as well as the L'Italienne and Ives campaigns. So, the way we work this is, Arnie's a talk radio host, so she's used to interruptions. So when you have a question, raise your hand and come forward, and we'll work with the technology to make sure that the people in Lawrence here, are you hearing me so far? Yes. Okay. So we'll work with the technology. We have a little bit of a limited range today, but we'll deal with it. So, Arnie.
Thank you. First, I want to sort of do a little bonding here. I'm a child of a union organizer. My earliest childhood memory is marching in front of Gracie Mansion in the longest teacher strike in New York City history. That was way back when. And then what you also need to know is he mentioned that I come from Orford, New Hampshire, the home of Meldrum Thompson, the most conservative governor probably in American history until 2010. And what you also need to know is that Meldrum Thompson and Bill Loeb, the publisher of the Union Leader, came up with this thing called the Notorious Pledge that every candidate running for governor must take in order to win in New Hampshire. And what I want to also remind you is that pledge is exactly the same as Grover Norquist's pledge. So before Grover Norquist was Mel Thompson and Bill Loeb. So we sort of laid the foundation for them. But on my other sort of union note, what you need to know is that my husband, when we moved to Orford, New Hampshire, went to work for Meldrum Thompson in his book publishing company. And within 6 months, he tried to organize a union and got fired for union organizing. So I start with a lot of sort of your background here. Because of the debate last week with Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown, well, New Hampshire is a very, very important state, and more important than we even quite understand, because Barack Obama has to win New Hampshire. We're one of the swing states. You also are, I think, on a par with Barack Obama and New Hampshire and Iowa and all the swing states. Why? Because of Elizabeth Warren. You've got to understand, you must elect her. And it's not because of Scott Brown being the 41st vote so that Mitch McConnell could get his wet dream and he could basically stop anything from happening in the United States Senate. It's because what has happened in the U.S. Senate is that it has gotten so skewed. We used to have voices of conservatives. We used to have voices of liberals and progressives. And we would then be able to find something called the center. What has happened over the last 20 years is that it is so skewed to the right that the center is here. The center isn't in the center anymore. We lost Russ Feingold. We lost Paul Wellstone. All those great voices. The only one less than Bernie. And I love Bernie, but Bernie can't do it on his own, and frankly, he's an independent. So you need to understand that Elizabeth Warren will be the person who is smart enough, who knows the numbers, knows the financial institutions, knows how the consumer is getting shafted. She is crucial because you need that voice on the floor of the U.S. Senate because she needs to educate Barack Obama, let alone educate United States senators. You need to know this. And I understand that Scott Brown is a nice guy. I actually know Scott better than I know Elizabeth. He is a nice guy. Go to dinner with him. Don't vote for him. And the problem is Elizabeth Warren does the walk, does the talk. She is where you are on every freaking issue. So just because she doesn't package so nice doesn't mean anything. She packages your future, not your relationship. That is so important. And let me just touch on the Native American issue. Because of this, I had a guy on the radio last week, because I do talk radio, and I interview people about books. So this guy comes on the radio, and he's just written a book about the Spanish-American War. And why did he write a book about the Spanish-American War? Because his great-grandfather was in the Spanish-American War. And he had told them all these stories about what happened. And so this writer made believe he was a Christian missionary and traveled in 2005 or 2006 to Cuba so he could study this war. And he gets down there and he's going to so he's going to learn all the things his grandfather told him about the war. He found out his great-grandfather made so much stuff up, it blew his mind. Now, it never occurred to him to question his grandfather. It never occurred to him that it was mythology. He believed him the way you would believe every family member. He didn't go down to Cuba to prove him wrong. But he got down to Cuba and he found out so much wasn't true. Does that mean he doesn't believe or love his grandfather? He loves him, but he knows that he wanted him to be impressed by him. Just the way Elizabeth Warren loved her family. If you're being told there are Native Americans in your family, are you going to say, Anthony, you're lying to me? Are you going to say, why? Because they were proud of that heritage, even if it wasn't their own. So just the way William Craig's great-grandfather didn't tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God, it also made him a great writer and a great man. Just the way those stories made Elizabeth Warren sensitized to all the issues that you care about. She is too damn important. Now, if you have any question about Elizabeth Warren, I'm going to recommend a documentary that you must watch. How many of you have seen Inside Job? All right? How many of you that saw Inside Job think it was fabulous? Now you have to watch this documentary, because Inside Job is about the economic meltdown of 2008. You will vomit when you finish watching this documentary, because you will be so outraged at what happened to this country and how we were taken to the cleaners. Here's the problem about Inside Job. It is now 2012, and so little has changed. So little has changed. During the economic meltdown of 2008, I can't remember who the senator's name was, but he was so upset by what was happening. Instead of bankers coming in asking for forgiveness, saying we're sorry, we gambled with the world's economy, basically what did he say? He said the bankers own this place. Well, in 2012, they absolutely continue to own the place. And it's not just about Elizabeth Warren. It is about Barack Obama, and it is about Mitt Romney. It is so important. So, I was looking at something because we talk about Occupy Wall Street. And one of my kids was down at the 1-year anniversary, and he was so depressed. I said, oh, don't be depressed, honey. I said, why? Because it described to us words we needed. 99 and 1. 99 and 1. It has gotten so much worse for most of us. And I decided to let you know how difficult it is and what the gap really looks like today. In 2010, the top 25 hedge fund managers in America made in total, in 1 year, over $25 billion. Now I'm going to give you a little statistic of what that means, okay? If you took every CEO of every major Forbes 500 corporation, added all their incomes up in 2010, then multiplied it times 6, you would not equal what 25 individuals made in 1 year. Can you believe it? And on top of that, what do hedge fund managers pay at their federal tax rate? Maximum 15%. Maximum 15%. Now the question is, who's out to protect hedge fund managers and who's out to protect you? And it's going to be people like Scott Brown, and it's going to be people like Mitt Romney. I mean, look what Mitt Romney just did with his tax returns the other day. Oh my God. This is a guy who actually went on record and said, if I pay more in taxes than I am obligated to do, you should never elect me president. He just did that in 2011. Why? Because his 2011 tax returns came out. Remember he said for the last 10 or 15 years, I've paid at a minimum 13%? If he had actually followed the Internal Revenue Service's laws and loopholes, guess what the tax rate would have been for 2011? 9%. 9%. Oh, so he managed to hire an accountant and say, don't take all them loopholes. Create the illusion of 14%. So can I tell you, everybody, what this election is about? One word. Bill Clinton gave it to you. Arithmetic. All right? It's absolutely about arithmetic. And what Romney doesn't understand is that we do math too. And not only did he distort his tax returns in 2011, he will not show you his last 10 years. Why? Because we're supposed to trust him about the other 10. Why? He already just showed us documentation that he manipulates his tax returns in 2011. What the hell makes you think he won't do it in 2008, 2009, 2000? And then the worst part is, what else does he do? He also now says, and this is a real problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that he suggests that his IRS obligation should be added to his charitable giving. That giving to charity is the same as giving in taxes. I'm curious here, how much of Mitt Romney's charitable giving came to northern Essex? Oh my God. How much of Mitt Romney's charitable giving came to food stamps? Went to a food shelter? Now, what bothers me about the fact that he even suggests that you should conflate his charitable giving with his federal obligation is twofold. What do we know about the Mormon faith? 10%. See, 10%. And you must give 10%. They actually do check your tax returns. And if you don't give 10%, you don't get into the temple. I mean, this is not a good idea to tithe. This is a mandatory tithe. And because he is now conflating it, ladies and gentlemen, I did a little homework about the Mormon faith. And I thought, okay, so I know that the Mormons bring in about $8 billion a year in tithing. I know that Mitt Romney gives a huge amount of money to the Mormon faith. In fact, it makes Ann Romney cry every time he cuts those checks, out of happiness, she said. Anyway, so she's crying giving to the Mormon faith. So I decided, since you're going to conflate it, then I want to know all about all the humanitarian charitable works the Mormon faith has done, because obviously I need to trust Mitt Romney, and since he's putting the two together, they must be doing remarkable things. You asked for this, Mitt. It turns out that they did an analysis of the Mormon faith and humanitarian and charitable work. Guess how much of the $8 billion on an annual basis goes into charitable humanitarian work? 0.7%. The United Methodist Church is another example. I happen to be United Methodist, I'll brag. 30%. all right? So by asking that and by making that suggestion, I don't care about his Mormon faith. I'm not electing him whether he's a Mormon, a Jew, or nothing. But by making that suggestion, you are now inviting me into your territory. A place I didn't want to go, but you're telling me I'm supposed to look at both? I will. And that's problematic. And then let's start looking at what's happening to you, because you know it's about education. We know about student debt. You've heard the story over and over again. It has now eclipsed credit card debt. It has now eclipsed auto debt. It's now over $1 trillion. So let me tell you about inflation in the cost of education since 1978. What do you think the inflation numbers are from 1978 to today on the cost of college education? Over 1,000%. Over 1,000%. So you are looking at college going through the roof for a couple of reasons. And one of them is state support for college education. And I mean both support in the way of grants, but I mean in support for what you do at the college. I don't know how many of you are from the state of New Hampshire, but let me be notorious now. New Hampshire ranks 50th in state aid to higher education, and if you tripled our state aid, we'd still be 50th. Last year, because local elections matter, I will get on my hands and knees, local elections matter. We have a Democratic governor, you would never know it. Why? Because we have a Tea Party speaker who has overwhelming majorities in the House and the Senate, and he could do a veto override over absolutely everything the governor wanted or didn't want. And here's what happened to higher education. We cut higher education in New Hampshire by almost 50% in one damn year. How do you do it? And you know what's even more upsetting? Is that, so we know we rank 50th in state aid to education. You know the story about student debt. So what do you think has actually happened with student debt in New Hampshire? Anybody know? The highest per capita student debt in the United States is in my damn state. There is a correlation between investment and student debt. No investment, you're shafting kids. And not only are you doing that, because I'm telling you about the tuition, here's what else is happening, and we need to let the rest of the economy know it. Who buys houses? Kids leaving school. They start families, they start jobs, they start and they buy a house. What are they starting to track in the real estate market? As this mortgage market has gone down, real estate values have plummeted. We know that you can get a mortgage for nothing, 2, 3%. But young people have stopped buying homes. They have dropped out of the real estate market. So it is now a story about the rest of us. You can't sell your house because there isn't the next young family stepping in. What student debt has now meant for most young people in America, I describe it now as the anti-dowry. Right? You move back home, you pay your debt, you don't get married, and you don't buy a house. Wow, there's the American dream for you.
Okay, Arnie.
Yes.
This is time for a commercial message. We have Tea Party candidates running in Massachusetts, right in this neighborhood. And so as you're leaving today, I'm going to ask you to sign here so that we can support the candidates who are going to defeat the kind of people who advocate for the same thing that we have in New Hampshire.
And please understand, this is a New Hampshire story and a Massachusetts story. It's an everybody's story. I just got off the news this morning because I was preparing for a show, and it turns out that in this election cycle, they're going to spend $3.3 billion in this election cycle. That blows the socks off of anything we've ever imagined. Two problems here. There's so many ads that used to be that the media would do some fact checking. Is it real or is it Memorex? How the hell do you fact check on $3.3 billion ads that are coming in all the time, nonstop? You can't. In part because the media has no one left on staff, because no one's buying newspapers, you know that. So they don't even have the fact checkers. Now they're being flooded out with an unbelievable amount of money. But what else do we know about that $3.3 billion? No transparency. We don't know who's spending the cash. Because of Citizens United, not only has it opened the floodgates of money, but now the money isn't even transparent. You don't even know who's behind it. How do you have a democracy when you have no idea who you're fighting? And that's exactly what is happening in this election, and it will happen in Massachusetts. They have so much money at the top, they now have lots of extra cash to make investments at the bottom. I will use my state as an example. We have 400 legislators. They earn a whopping $100 a year, and they represent something the size of a shoe. Okay, like 3,000 people. Very good. Who's going to spend a lot of money in a primary for $100 a year representing 12 people? You're not. So what did they do? The secretive nonprofits with all this extra cash created all these little mini unique nonprofits to target moderate Republicans in all these races around the state, and they purged them. These were people that were elected for 10 terms. Everybody loved. Everybody knew. They didn't even know the guy that was running against them. But it didn't matter, because all of a sudden anonymous money came in a low voter turnout, and they only needed to get 1,000 votes. They could carry 1,000 people to the polls and pay for their taxi cabs. And that's almost what they did. Now understand, they were doing it in New Hampshire. They will do it in Massachusetts. You think, oh, this is a liberal state. Oh, we always vote for these wonderful majorities in the House and Senate. Not this time. Because they understand that they're almost, I hate to say this, I actually think they think that Mitt Romney is expendable. But what they want to do is they want to invest in the bottom. Because if they have it at the bottom, then they have the foundation that can work itself up. And understand, we didn't even realize what happened in my state. In 2010, we went from one of the bluest states in the nation to not even a red state. If you think Wisconsin is conservative, I'll move there. Because they're so liberal compared to what we are here. And it happened without us even knowing it. Because we either took it for granted, we didn't hustle our butts, and here's the problem. We will never have their money. But we have something better. We have the damn vote. And the problem is you can't vote alone. What you have to understand is if you get it, then you can't let anyone you know not vote this election season. You can't. And they're going to try damn hard. Why? What about the voter ID bills that are cropping up everywhere? You want to hear a really fun statistic? Now remember, all of a sudden we have all this voter fraud. Well, actually, the voter fraud became apparent in 2011. It wasn't apparent in 29, 28, 27. In 2011, 180 voter identification bills were introduced across the country. Where were most of them introduced? I love where voter fraud shows up. Swing states. Swing states. Isn't that interesting? Oh my God, we don't have voter fraud in California, but we suddenly have voter fraud in New Hampshire. How did that happen? I didn't even know about it. So you have 180 bills. You have a significant number of them passing. Why? Because you suddenly got Republican governors elected, Republican-dominated legislatures, and all of a sudden they were able to put these voter ID bills in. And it's not about identification. You know damn well it's about voter suppression. A lot of those bills will not be overturned in time for this election, so you have two jobs. In my state, for example, we do have a voter ID bill. It is, in effect, it will pass. I just got asked the question. I have a friend whose mother is very sick, she doesn't drive, she doesn't have a license. Oh my God, how is she going to vote? Can I tell you something, ladies and gentlemen? She doesn't need a thing. She can just show up. You see, all the talk about the voter bill doesn't actually tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. They have this glide path that's a really bad bill, but it doesn't really go into effect till 2013. So in 2012, her friend can show up with niente and vote. But most people are hearing about the voter ID bills, and they're hearing about what they may need. So what are they doing? They're either trying to get what they think the identification is, or they're assuming they shouldn't show up. Isn't that the point? Not to show up? Oh my God, how horrific is this? So that's why you can't fight them on the money, but you can fight them on the turnout. And turnout now, especially at those small races, are so important. You'll get Barack. he may finally even get Elizabeth Warren, and that will be a close race. But it's what happens down the food chain that is going to be crucial. Because once they get in, they're tenacious. And that's the other thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about Democrats and progressives. Not Democrats. Because you ever notice that when Republicans get elected, they actually do something. And then we get elected and we apologize. No, oh, I won't do so much. Oh, how do you feel about that? Oh my God. They get the power, they take it off the cliff. We get the power and say maybe next year. So part of the reason why you need to show up and you need to let people know what you think. Barack Obama now is in his last term. Let's hope he accomplishes everything he didn't accomplish in his first term. And the more amazing thing about all of this, for example, is you've got to change the situation, is we have to protect health care. I know you have a variation on universal health care, but you need to know something, ladies and gentlemen. I have lost my health care 3 times in my life, all right? And you know when one of them was? When I was running for governor, all right? Now, you need to hear this because it's too important, because this is too huge a fight. I lost my health care because my husband was an attorney. That was at the economic downturn of 1992, okay? So he had no business. And he had a choice. He could pay the highest property tax rates in the United States, New Hampshire, or he could pay the health insurance bill. Now, what would the public know about? Arnie didn't pay her property taxes. Not that Arnie doesn't have health insurance. So what did he do? He decided to kill the health insurance so that my family and 2 daughters basically went without health insurance until the end of the campaign when he told me. Now here's the real kicker. What did I discover during the campaign? A lump on my breast. All right? I lose the race for governor. I never go to the doctor. It is now January. We finally have gotten reinsured. I finally go to the doctor. And to be honest with you, there's a little aside here. Can you imagine a governor who could have testified in 1992 between Bill and Hillary's presidency to talk about having health insurance? Would that have helped Hillary care? I don't know. Anyway, so I go to the doctor in January, and the doctor says to me, when did you first find the lump? And I said, in August. He said, Arnie, it's January. Why did you wait so long? And I said to him, because I didn't have health insurance. And he said, oh, you're so stupid. He said, the cost of a mammogram is only $75. We do it on a sliding scale. And then I looked at him and I said, oh, you're so stupid. I said, I could afford the mammogram. I couldn't afford the answer. Okay? That story gets played out all the time. It's just like voter suppression. I could have gone for the mammogram, but I couldn't. All right? It's the idea that I had to self-check because I couldn't afford what would happen to my family. And here's the killer, and you need to have this information at your fingertips because I want to sit down with the bishops and the cardinals and the Pope. And let me tell you why. Because I know they're opposed to the Affordable Care Act. So let me tell you a story from Oregon. You need to know this. Oregon, back in 2006, decided to do something remarkable. Before the country really began to experiment with health care, they had a governor who happened to be a doctor. So he decided that he wanted to expand Medicaid, just like Barack Obama wants to do, to 133% of poverty, so people who normally couldn't access health care would suddenly be covered by Medicaid. Here was Oregon's problem. They didn't have enough money to cover everybody at 133%. And they didn't want to lower it to 120 or 110. So guess what the state of Oregon decided to do? They held a lottery. And if you won the lottery, you got Medicaid. And if you lost the lottery, you didn't. Can you imagine? But think about it. It is a crapshoot. You know that. If you have a job, you have health care. If you don't have a job, you can't afford the COBRA. Come on. It's everyone knows that we live it. So this is what they did in Oregon. Now let me fast forward to 2012. Because the New York Times and Kaiser Permanente went in and did a study because they said, oh my God, empirical data. Never before have we had such a pure place to study whether Medicaid makes a difference. And it turned out being able to go to a doctor and not just an emergency room made a huge difference. Despite what Rick Perry says, the governor of Texas, everybody in Texas has access to health care. They have the highest level of uninsured in the country in Texas. He's talking about an emergency room. And so what Oregon found out was that being covered by Medicaid made a difference in your emotional life, in your economic life, and in your health. But this is the worst part of the story. So they interviewed people who lost
the lottery. And they interviewed a young woman in her mid-20s. And the woman in her mid-20s was talking to her boyfriend. Because in order to get health care, where did she have to go? She had to go to free clinics. What was one of the free clinics she went to? Planned Parenthood. She goes to Planned Parenthood and discovers she has some kind of stage 2 cancer. But it's only stage 2. So she can't access the kind of health care she would need to access because she wasn't extreme enough, okay, acute enough. So she's about in her mid-20s. She turns to her boyfriend, ladies and gentlemen, and she says to her boyfriend, you know, if I got pregnant, I would immediately qualify for Medicaid, and I could get treatment for my cancer. You see why I want to sit down with one of those bishops and cardinals and popes? So look what she needed to do to get health care. Look at the Sophie's choice. Get treated for cancer, abort the baby. Have the baby, get the treatment. Oh my God. Oh my God. You need to know that story. That's the story. That's an immoral choice. That's a horrific story. And yet that's the kind of story that plays out over and over and over again. We can't afford the health care we have today, and we can't afford not to have health care. It is outrageous, and you are now competing with health care. You need to know this. Back in the 1980s, I went down to a public sector union shebang in Atlantic City.
Just hold on a second, Arnie. I'm just going to tell you about these clipboards I'm passing out so that we can, I'm trying to recruit people to help us on some visibility work with President Obama in New Hampshire and with our local candidates down here. An hour or two, that's all I'm asking for, okay? And it'll probably be on a Saturday morning, maybe on a weekday, but please indicate your name and also your home email or your cell phone, okay? Not so much the college email, you get in trouble with that. But make sure, please, an hour or two, that's all I'm asking, okay? Go ahead, Arnie.
So it's 1980, and I'm down there, and I haven't run for any higher office. I'm a $100 a year legislator, but I'm passionate about the issue of health care because I lost my health insurance. Why do you think I ran for the legislature? Don't get mad, get even. That was my theory. So I went down to run for the legislature so I could actually bring access to health care for part-time workers. If you go back to my history, it wasn't taxes, it was health care. So here I am talking to these public sector workers, all of whom had great pensions and great health care, and that wasn't on their radar. And I looked at them and I said, you're fools. I said, it better be on your radar. And they said, why? I said, because here's what's happening. With each passing year, most of us in the private sector either are losing our health care or eating more and more of our premiums or finding out we're at greater and greater deductibles. And eventually it's going to get to the point where we're going to say, if it's so bad for us, you ain't having it either. All right? Now remember, this is in the 1980s, before it was on anybody's radar. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And it turns out that I was thinking, all right. Because not only are they angry that they don't have it, and you do, but it also turns out if you look at state budgets, there are two items on state budgets that are the Pac-Man of the budget. It goes like this. One is health care, the other is prisons. All right? Now look at that. All right, so what do prisons do for the economy? Not much. And what is healthcare now doing for the economy? It's eating every dollar that should go into education. It's eating every dollar that should go into infrastructure. It's eating every dollar that should help businesses survive. Businesses hate healthcare as much as I do. They don't like Obamacare either. They don't want to be responsible. But they can't have sick workers and they know it. They can't. The problem is, how do we figure out how to solve it? So healthcare is important to be solved because it's about your job and your future. Because those are dollars that are not going to go into education. They will divert it away from you. So it really is now your choice because it is about your future. And it's outrageous how we're not solving this problem. And then, of course, we have to get back to the T word. And of course, we keep talking about the fact that we have this enormous, enormous debt. We absolutely do. But you know why we have this enormous debt. When you have 2 wars off budget, you have an enormous debt. When you go to war and don't pay for it, you have an enormous debt. When you have a defense budget that's bigger than, what, 100 countries put together, what are we building? We're not building futures, we're building bombs. Bombs that will eventually be used on us. That's the irony. We're handing them the weapon to be used on us. And now look what's going on in the Middle East. Are we loved or hated? And you know the irony is, we were actually loved after 9/11. They actually loved us. And we took all that support and we squandered it. And we lost it. And what's so frightening about Mitt Romney is this was a Christian Science Monitor reporter friend of mine did a story about him, about how he wanted to divide the budget. And this was one item he left out of his article. I could not believe it. I asked him about the defense budget. Here's Mitt Romney's answer. We must spend at least 4% of the gross domestic product on the military defense budget, which, by the way, is far greater than we're spending now. And I said to him, did you ask him for what? No, 4%. I said, so he's going to pick a number out of the air that has no relationship to security, that has no relationship to what the military wants, that has no relationship to anything, but it's a number. How can you be president and arbitrarily and capriciously pull a number that will not only bankrupt us, but what is it investing in? In our stability? Look at the Mideast. How stable are we? Unbelievable. And then I need to tell you a story about education, because New Hampshire is the great experiment coming to you soon. I told you we had a Tea Party Speaker of the House, which is why you have to work in those local races, I beg you. Because all you need is 1 or 2 Tea Party people to get in and start writing the legislation and trying to convince everybody else you want this, and it will sound reasonable. So New Hampshire is very cheap when it comes to public education. We don't invest very much. And we also have very low taxes. Don't be jealous. And what happens is that they decided that they wanted to divert money from public education and invest it in private and parochial schools. Now, how would you do this? Especially parochial schools. It's getting a little edgy here, you know? I mean, separation of church and state used to be a good idea. Anyway, so here's what they passed. They passed a bill in the New Hampshire House which is called a scholarship bill. Now, stay with me. What they said is, they said to businesses, before you send your business profits tax check to Congress, we have a great idea. If you divert a portion of your money to this scholarship fund, that will then spend money on people who want to go to private schools or parochial schools, we will give you an 85% credit for every dollar you put into the scholarship fund. Now, that still means that they lose 15%, right? 85%? Can I tell you how brilliant the Tea Party person was that wrote this law that now is the law in New Hampshire? It turns out that that 85% credit, actually when you do the taxes in New Hampshire, is an effective rate of 93%. Wait a minute, it gets worse. Because they are sending the money to this nonprofit for this scholarship, which means the money never actually goes into the tax coffers, guess what the corporation gets to do? They get to write it off as a charitable contribution. And the federal government now makes it 107%. They actually make money diverting their taxes into a fund to create scholarships for private and parochial schools. Oh my God. And nobody in my state knew that when it passed. Nobody. Because nobody had done what? Bill Clinton's word. Arithmetic. And what's even more frightening is that now you see those vital tax dollars that go into things like education and healthcare and the environment being diverted with an incentive to divert it. Now, if you're a good corporate leader, you are obligated to do that. Because you don't make moral judgments, you make profit decisions. And now, if your stockholders are to be honest, it is profitable for you to divert the money out of the tax coffers of the state into these private and parochial schools. But here's the worst part. Every time a child leaves the public school system, what happens? The money that follows that child into that public school disappears. So not only have you lost the tax dollars, not only have you lost a student, but those schools have now lost those dollars that they need to continue to educate their kids. It is a triple loss. We passed it. We passed it. It is the most extreme version of a scholarship bill in the country. And how did it happen? There's a group that you may have heard of, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. They come up with these brilliant ideas, and then, like fairy dust, they suddenly show up in 50 states, and depending on where it lands, it may get enough fertilizer to actually pass. Well, my legislature has more than enough fertilizer to make it pass. And that's exactly what happened. So I am telling you right now, more money going in at the lowest possible level of the election, food chain, you've got to participate. You can't make any assumptions in this election cycle, none. It is really about our future. It has never been so stark. And I want to read you just one line. We know about the growing gap between rich and poor. It is at the worst it has ever been. Let me read you a line from a friend of mine. He's a professor at a university in England. And he wrote, "The current concentration of wealth exceeds any previous period in history, from King Midas to the Maharajas to the robber barons to Silicon Valley and the Wall Street moguls." He argues that in most countries, including the United States, the sudden emergence of a large super-rich class of billionaires has been promoted by the nation-states and lower levels of government that have conspired with the wealthiest class to serve their interests over the rest. And on the 47%, before I let you go, so Mitt Romney doesn't care about the 47% because they're not going to be impacted by his tax policy, right? Because he wants to lower taxes. Actually, Mitt Romney needs to do arithmetic. And this is the arithmetic nobody has done on television. We know that it's the elderly and because of earning the tax credits and because of people serving in the military and the handicapped. That explains the 47%, and some people who are unemployed. But what you need to know is, if you looked at state, local, and federal taxes, and you looked at the lowest 20%, the lowest 20% of Americans, when you include state, local, and federal, pay about 16% of their income in total taxes. More than Mitt Romney in his 2011 tax return. Remember, 9%? So that bottom 21% that can barely feed their families are paying FICA plus 16%. We're not including FICA, all right? The next 20%, so we're getting to that 40%, they pay 21% in taxes, all right? So Mitt Romney has to start doing some math. And here's the killer. If Mitt Romney wins the election and they decide to cut the budget even more, what are they talking about? They're talking about cutting aid to the states. They're talking about cutting aid to transportation and infrastructure. So what are they doing? They're lowering his liability, and they're saying to state and local government, start finding the cash. So in fact, he does raise taxes on the bottom 47% because they are paying now. Do the math. Don't apologize. They are paying. And what's worse is that the federal tax return, the federal system, is actually progressive. But it turns out that most state taxes in all of the 50 states are regressive. The top 1% pay a third or a half of what the bottom 20 pay. So even as he eliminates the burdens at the top, he's done double damage to the bottom. So if you want to talk about lost opportunity, I guarantee he'll deliver.
Thank you. We could continue a little bit after, but I know a lot of people have to leave. There are a number. Thank you, many of you, for signing. I've got a number of names here. I'm really very happy about that. If you would like to sign and haven't had a chance to, there's a clipboard there over here. But I think, Arnie, can you stay for a few questions?
If anybody has any questions or thoughts or something I said that didn't make sense, ask me.
I have a question.
about the last thing we were just talking about with the numbers, which is so important.
Oh,
I
God.
teach English, I'm not a numbers woman. On the other hand, Ezra Klein from the Washington Post is a numbers guy. He has charts that I can read, but I don't know a way to make that more available to people to know. How do we have that conversation when I'm not, how do I tell people to read Ezra? Because he's got the answers.
Can I tell you something? I give a talk when I was running for Congress. I'll gloat a little. I was one of the 6 Congress people that were running that year that would change Congress if they wanted. Okay? So I was at this big Matha event, a big high donor event, and I got up and I said, I'm really jealous of Republicans. And they said, what do you mean? I said, Republicans can run their entire campaign on a bumper sticker. And the word is no. No government, no taxes, no regulation. And here's the beauty of no. You don't have to explain. Oh my God, it's a wonderful world. When you say no taxes, you assume it's done. I said, you know what the problem on my damn side is? Where about yes? Yes, some taxes, yes, some regulation, yes, some government. And the yes has to be explained. Because it isn't a broad yes to all your income. Yes, it's some taxes, based on certain circumstances, at a certain level, and it takes so damn long. And here's what my side has forgotten to remind the American people. They've forgotten to remind the American people that you don't build a life around no. You build a life around yes. Let me explain. Yes, I love you. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll take this job. Yes, I'll buy this house. Yes, I'll have these children. But you don't say yes to everything. And you don't say yes to everyone. And you don't say yes to 12 kids. You say yes to 2. It is a difficult and challenging yes. But you build a life around yes. And you build nothing around no. And we need to be able to be given the time to explain to the American people that yes is a celebration about what is possible and no takes us back. And what Mitt Romney wants to do is say no to everything because he doesn't need us. He doesn't. Whenever they talk about the job creators, you've got to get on talk radio and ask the next question. Creating a job where? Where? They are job creators, but they are no longer related to state. Why do you think Mitt Romney has money in the Cayman Islands? Why do you put money in a Swiss bank account? I asked a tax accountant that. Only one reason. Not to pay taxes. You don't care about the economy of the Cayman Islands. You don't even care if there's a bank teller in the Cayman Islands. I mean, think about it. The only reason to shove it there is because it's called tax avoidance. And why does Mitt Romney not want to show you his 2009 tax return? Notice he stopped at 2010. Well, at least give me 2009. Anyone know what happened in 2009? This is great fodder for talk radio. 2009, the IRS passed a tax amnesty proposal. And they said to all those rich people, bring your money in from all those little foreign locations and we won't penalize you. Just pay the damn taxes, no penalty, we won't know. Just bring it in. People did. People did by the billions. Probably did. Why don't we see his 2009 tax return? Because then you'll find out how much money he wasn't ever paid on. And that's why it's so important. And then I'll give you a little sidebar that I can't say is totally accurate, but maybe. Who has been the most obnoxious about Mitt Romney's tax returns? What politician? Harry Reid. What do we know about Harry Reid and Mitt Romney? What do they have in common?
They share a religion.
They share a religion. They're both Mormon. Okay. So now let me tell you the Mormon connection again. I love these stories. I don't know if it's totally true, but it sounds close. So here's what happened. Who do we know that ran for president and only made it through the New Hampshire primary, but was also Mormon?
John Huntsman.
John Huntsman. What do you know about John Huntsman's father? He invested in Bain in the early years. So John Huntsman's father and Mitt Romney go back. Who is really pissed at how his son was treated? John Huntsman's father. He is really angry at Mitt Romney. So the rumor on the street is, from my friends then in Washington, is that John Huntsman's dad and Mitt Reid talk. And they talk a lot because he's had access to lots of things and lots of information about Mitt Romney's tax returns. Now, do I believe it? No. Is it great mythology? Sure. But at the same time, this is the problem with not releasing your tax returns. That story has legs because it could be true. Because when you don't show me, and in the damn return you do show me, you manipulate the result, why would I believe anything? Why would anyone elect someone who is so not transparent as President of the United States? How can you put your future into a blank slate? And that's exactly what people are being asked to do. And the question I have is, why the hell would Republicans want to do it? They don't trust him anyway. You know, that's what's so frightening. And that's what we're seeing. It's really, really scary. So this is an opportunity